Sorp's tentacles twitched in frustration as he exclaimed, 5 centuries of effort, and you're telling me the answer was a paperclip? The human technician, Jake, smirked, casually spinning the paperclip in his fingers. What can I say? Sometimes the easiest fixes are the most overlooked. Zek's eye stalks wavered, a clear indication of irritation in Glorian body language. But we've had the most brilliant minds in the Galactic Federation tackle this issue for generations. How could something so basic have slipped through? Jake gave a relaxed shrug, his grin widening. Maybe that's exactly why they missed it. Sometimes you need a fresh approach, or, in this case, a species that still values old-school problem-solving over all the high-tech stuff. Behind them, the ancient alien elevator roared to life, its doors gliding open with a gentle whoosh, for the first time in 500 years. A crowd of onlookers, a strange mix of tentacles, feelers, and other sensory appendages, gasped in unison. The sight could easily make a Lovecraftian nightmare seem tame by comparison. Well, slap me with a Zoran's fin, muttered an elderly alien resembling a combination of a shriveled fruit and a jellyfish. It actually worked. Jake couldn't resist the urge to show off a little. With a dramatic bow, he held up the humble paperclip for all to see. Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed gender-neutral beings, I present to you the wonders of human ingenuity. A ripple of amusement spread through the alien crowd, or at least what could be interpreted as laughter among the various species. But Sorp was far from amused. This is absurd, he blustered, his tentacles now knotted in frustration. We cannot admit that a mere primitive solved our greatest engineering riddle with a simple office tool. Jake raised an eyebrow. First off, that's a bit insulting. We prefer the term highly evolved primates. Second, why not admit it? Looks like you guys could use a little humility. Maybe it's time to think outside your usual bubble. A few murmurs of agreement passed through the crowd. Zek's eye stalks drooped in resignation. Fine, he muttered, but don't expect me to be happy about it. Wouldn't dream of it, Jake replied, giving Zek what he hoped was a reassuring pat on what looked like a shoulder. Now, who's up for a ride? Eager to experience vertical travel once more, the crowd surged toward the now-functional elevator. As Jake watched the various aliens pack inside, he chuckled to himself. Who would have thought that humanity's first notable contribution to galactic society would be repairing a malfunctioning lift with a paperclip? Then again, maybe a little inside-the-box thinking was just what the universe needed. 24 hours earlier, Jake had been minding his own business, tinkering with the quantum flux capacitor on his worn-out ship, fondly named the Rusty Bucket, when an urgent message crackled through his communication system. To all sentient beings within transmission range, this is an emergency request from the Galactic Federation. We're facing a technical issue that requires urgent assistance, the voice said. Jake scoffed, shaking his head. Yeah, sure. Probably just some alien big shot forgot their password again. But curiosity got the better of him, and with a sigh, he accepted the call. The hologram of a stressed-out Glorian flickered to life in front of him. Jake recognized the species immediately. Tentacles, eye stalks, and a love for bureaucracy that could drive anyone crazy. Greetings. The Glorian squinted at something off-screen. Rusty Bucket? Is that your designation? Jake couldn't help but chuckle. Nah, that's my ship's name. I'm Jake. What's the issue, Tentacles? The Glorian bristled slightly. I am Sorp, Chief Engineer of the Galactic Federation's Historical Preservation Committee. We have a matter of critical importance that demands immediate attention. Jake raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, relax. What's the big crisis? Sorp took a deep breath, or something that looked like one. We have a non-functional elevator. Jake blinked. Sorry, could you repeat that? An elevator, Zik said, a little more forcefully. It's stuck. Jake rolled his eyes. Yeah, I know what an elevator is, but you're seriously telling me the mighty Galactic Federation is sending out distress calls over a broken elevator? Zix's eye stalks drooped a bit, looking defeated. It's not just any elevator. This is the ancient elevator of Zorax Prime, a priceless relic of immense historical and cultural value. It's been inoperable for about 500 of your Earth years. Jake let out a low whistle. That's quite the backlog. Did you forget to hire a repair crew or something? This is no trivial matter. Zix snapped, clearly offended. Our best engineers have tried for centuries to fix it. The materials are unknown to modern science, and the power source, we barely understand it. This elevator is an engineering marvel from a long-extinct civilization, and its malfunction is a source of great embarrassment for the Federation. Leaning back in his chair, Jake gave the Glorian a sly smile. And you're reaching out to me because? Zix's tentacles flushed slightly in what Jake assumed was the aliens' version of a shrug. We've exhausted all other possibilities. Your species has a certain reputation for unconventional problem solving. We thought perhaps a human might bring fresh insight. Aha! Jake said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. And what's in it for me? The undying gratitude of the Galactic Federation. Zix replied, puffing up with pride. Jake raised an eyebrow. Aha, and what else? Zix deflated, clearly aware of where this was going. A significant reward in credits, precious materials, or whatever currency you prefer. Now Jake was interested. Now we're talking. All right, Tentacles, you've got yourself a deal. Send me the coordinates, and I'll see what I can do about your ancient elevator problem. As the hologram blinked out, Jake couldn't help but laugh to himself. An elevator stuck for 500 years? This was either going to be the easiest job ever, or a complete disaster. Either way, he was up for the challenge. Jake's arrival aboard the space station was certainly something to behold, at least for everyone watching from the polished hulls of their sleek, high-tech ships. The rusty bucket, true to its name, rattled and groaned like an ancient beast clinging to life as it made its way into the docking bay. The sharp contrast between his dented, battle-worn craft and the pristine vessels surrounding it wasn't lost on him. Well, girl, he said, patting the console with a mix of pride and relief, you got us here in one piece. Mostly, the docking clamp engaged with an alarming series of creaks and groans, but Jake didn't pay it much mind. After years in the rusty bucket, he was used to all kinds of strange sounds. He grabbed his trusty, weathered toolbox, more patches than metal at this point, but as reliable as ever, and slung it over his shoulder. With a deep breath, he opened the airlock and stepped out into the bustling station. Immediately, his senses were bombarded. The sheer diversity of life here was overwhelming. Aliens of every possible shape, size, and color filled the station. Their languages a mix of buzzing, chirping, and droning tones. The air was thick with exotic aromas, some spicy and tantalizing, others less so. Jake grimaced at a particularly unpleasant odor that wafted past him. All right, he muttered to himself, trying to focus. Find the elevator. Fix the elevator. Easy enough, right? Just then, a familiar whirlwind of tentacles and eye stalks came rushing through the crowd toward him. Zix Sorp, now more flustered than ever, skidded to a halt in front of Jake, his eye stalks flailing wildly in every direction. You've arrived, Zix exclaimed, his eyes twitching as if barely keeping it together. We were starting to worry. Your ship's approach was, well, let's say it was rather unpredictable. Jake chuckled, patting his toolbox affectionately. She's seen better days, sure, but she gets the job done. Now, where's this infamous elevator? Zix's tentacles twitched nervously, a gesture Jake was starting to recognize as a bad omen. Ah, yes, about that. There's been a slight complication. Jake groaned inwardly. Of course there has. What's the problem now? Zix fidgeted as they began walking through the crowded station. Word of your arrival has spread quite extensively. There's, a bit of an audience gathered at the elevator. Jake raised an eyebrow. A bit of an audience? As they rounded a corner, Jake's eyes went wide. A bit was the understatement of the year. The entire atrium was jam-packed with aliens, craning their necks, extending tentacles, or adjusting eye stalks, all eager to get a glimpse of the ancient elevator and the human who was supposed to fix it. Oh great, Jake muttered. No pressure. Zix's eye stalks drooped in embarrassment. I'm afraid your task has become something of a spectacle. The entire Galactic Federation is watching closely. Jake sighed, then squared his shoulders. Well, if they want a show, I'll give them a show. With a mischievous glint in his eye, he started pushing his way through the crowd, Zix following nervously behind. As Jake moved forward, the sea of aliens parted for him, a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and amusement on their many faces, or what passed for faces. When he finally reached the elevator, Jake got his first real look at the so-called marvel of ancient engineering. It was underwhelming. A pair of dull, metal doors embedded into a wall that looked like it hadn't seen maintenance in centuries. It wasn't exactly what he had expected from a relic that had supposedly baffled the best minds of the Galactic Federation for 500 years. Jake smirked, cracking his knuckles. All right, let's see what we're dealing with. The only clue to its ancient magnificence was the intricate, swirling designs carved into the metal, designs that seemed to subtly shift and ripple as Jake stared at them. He muttered, reaching out instinctively to touch one of the swirling patterns. That's a cool trick. Zix Sorp immediately panicked, his tentacles flailing wildly. Don't touch it. The patterns are extremely sensitive to, but Jake's finger had already made contact. Instantly, the entire elevator lit up like a neon sign. The swirling designs blazed with a strange, ethereal light, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air. The crowd of onlookers gasped in perfect unison. Jake jerked his hand back as if the metal had burned him. My bad. Zix's tentacles were tied into tight knots, and Jake feared the poor alien might never manage to untangle them. "What have you done?" Zix wailed, his voice a mix of disbelief and fear. Before Jake could respond, the elevator doors slid open with a soft whoosh. The problem? There was nothing on the other side. No car, no machinery, just an empty void, a blackness so deep it seemed to absorb the very light around it. Jake squinted into the darkness, then glanced at Zix with a grin. "Hey, look at that. I fixed your elevator." The crowd erupted into a cacophony of excitement, their various alien voices chattering wildly. Zix, however, looked on the verge of fainting, if Glorians even had the ability to faint. This is impossible," he muttered, completely dumbfounded. "We've tried everything, quantum resonators, tachyon beam analysis, even just hitting it." "How did you?" Jake shrugged, his grin growing wider. "Sometimes it just needs the right touch. So who's gonna be the first to ride?" The entire crowd fell into an awkward silence. Every eye, tentacle, or sensory organ present turned toward the yawning black void that had just been revealed. Suddenly, no one seemed so eager to test out the newly functioning ancient elevator. Jake sighed dramatically. "I guess it's up to me then. Science and all that." As he moved toward the open doors, Zix's tentacles lashed out, grabbing Jake's arm in desperation. "Wait, we don't know if it's safe. That elevator could take you anywhere. Another dimension, into the heart of a star, or worse, into the stomach of some ancient space creature." Jake gently pried the tentacles off, giving Zix a reassuring smile. "Well, there's only one way to find out, right? Besides, isn't this what you brought me here for?" With a wink and a quick salute to the bewildered crowd, Jake stepped into the darkness. The last thing he saw before the doors slid shut was the absolute horror spreading across Zix Sorp's many eyes. Then, nothing. Jake had been prepared for all kinds of possibilities when stepping into the ancient alien elevator, a wild ride to a distant world, maybe a leap through space and time, or even a quick and painless disintegration. But what he hadn't anticipated was this total, all-encompassing nothingness. There was no light, no sound, and no sensation. He couldn't feel his body, couldn't tell if he was standing, sitting, or floating. It was as though he had been dropped into a void so complete, so absolute, that reality itself had ceased to exist. For all he knew, his physical form might not even exist anymore. Well, he thought to himself, trying to stay calm, this is something, or rather, the lack of anything at all. Well, this is underwhelming, Jake mused to himself, or at least he assumed he was thinking. It was hard to tell in the vast, featureless emptiness surrounding him. He tried to move, to speak, to do anything at all, but nothing responded. It was as if everything had vanished, except his consciousness, which now floated adrift in an infinite sea of nothingness. "Hello?" He tried to shout, though no sound came out. There wasn't even the familiar sensation of vocal cords vibrating, if he even still had those. "Anyone there? Is this thing working? I'd like to file a complaint about a malfunctioning elevator." No answer. Not even a faint echo returned to him. Jake couldn't help but wonder if this was some sort of cosmic prank. Maybe he'd stumbled into some interdimensional limbo. Was this what happened when you accidentally divided by zero? As he began to contemplate the dismal possibility of being stuck in this void for eternity, and wouldn't that make for an exciting afterlife, a change occurred. At first, it was so subtle that Jake thought he was imagining it, a faint flicker in the abyss, like a distant star in the farthest reaches of the cosmos. Then another appeared, and another. Soon, pinpoints of light began dotting the void, growing in number until they were scattered everywhere. Well, that's nice, Jake thought. Is this the part where I'm supposed to see my whole life replay? Because if so, I'd prefer a version with more action. Maybe a few explosions, but the lights weren't showing him memories. Instead, they started aligning, taking on shapes and patterns. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, an image materialized. It was a paperclip. If Jake still had eyelids, he would have blinked in bewilderment. A paperclip? Out of all the infinite mysteries of the universe, this alien elevator had chosen to present him with an office supply. Seriously? But as he concentrated on the shape, it started to make sense. The paperclip wasn't just a random item. It was a key, a solution, the long-awaited answer to a puzzle that had baffled minds for centuries. "You've got to be kidding me," Jake thought, incredulous. Centuries of brilliant alien scientists, and the answer had been as mundane as something you'd find at the bottom of a desk drawer? The sheer irony of it was too perfect. So simple, yet so genius. It was so quintessentially human that Jake couldn't help but laugh, or whatever passed for laughter in this disembodied state. And with that laugh, everything shifted. The void shattered like fragile glass, and reality rushed back in a chaotic swirl of sensations. Jake stumbled out of the elevator, gasping for air, his legs unsteady gently beneath him like those of a baby giraffe learning to stand. The group of aliens surrounding him recoiled in shock, their exclamations rising in a cacophony of surprise. Zix Sorp, who had clearly worn a groove into the floor from pacing, spun around, his eye stalks twisting in disbelief. "You're alive!" the Glorian exclaimed, his tentacles thrashing in astonishment. "We thought you'd vanished forever. It's been hours." Jake leaned against the wall for balance, his head still swimming. Hours? Felt more like minutes, or maybe centuries. Time's weird like that. He glanced back at the elevator, which now hummed softly, its doors closed, a gentle glow pulsing from its patterns. "Well," Jake said, straightening up and brushing himself off, "I've got good news and bad news." The gathered aliens leaned in, their faces, if you could call them that, showing a blend of anticipation and concern. "The good news," Jake began, "is that I know how to fix your elevator." A murmur of excitement passed through the group, and Zix Sorp's eye stalks perked up with hope. "And the bad news?" Jake continued, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well, you're not going to like the solution." Zix Sorp's tentacles tightened nervously. "What do you mean? What did you discover in there?" With a casual flair, Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, bent piece of metal. He held it aloft with mock grandeur. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished non-binary extraterrestrials, I present to you the answer to your 500-year-old conundrum." A paperclip. The silence that followed was deafening. If anyone had dropped a pin or a paperclip, it would have echoed like a gong. Zix Sorp finally broke the stillness, his voice laced with confusion and indignation. "What? A paperclip?" Jake repeated, spinning the object between his fingers. "Simple earth tool, mostly used to hold papers together, sometimes to pick locks, and, as it turns out, to fix ancient alien elevators." A chaotic mixture of reactions swept through the crowd: disbelief, outrage, confusion. Zix Sorp looked like he was on the verge of imploding, assuming Glorians even had the biological capacity to do so. "This is absurd," the alien sputtered. "You expect us to believe that the key to solving this complex, ancient technology is a primitive Earth office supply?" Jake shrugged. "Hey, don't blame me. I'm just the messenger. I'm telling you what the weird void in the elevator showed me. And anyway, what have you got to lose? Your high-tech gadgets haven't done the job, have they?" Zix Sorp's tentacles flailed in frustration. But how? Where would we even insert such a thing in this advanced mechanism?" Jake stepped up to the elevator, his eyes scanning the intricate patterns on its surface. Now that he knew what he was looking for, he spotted it, a tiny, almost invisible slot hidden within the swirling designs. "Right here," Jake said, pointing to the barely perceptible slit. "See that? It's like the universe's most over-engineered keyhole." The crowd surged forward, their many eyes, tentacles, and assorted sensory appendages all vying for a closer look. Zix Sorp squinted at the spot Jake had indicated, his expression wavering between disbelief and reluctant acceptance. "I suppose it could be some sort of access point," the Glorian admitted with a sigh. "But it can't possibly be that simple." Jake's grin widened. "Only one way to find out." He straightened the paperclip in his hand. "Shall we give it a go?" Zix Sorp hesitated, his tentacles writhing in anxiety. The solution to a mystery that had baffled the galaxy for centuries, the reputation of the Galactic Federation, and quite possibly his entire career now rested on a tiny piece of Earth metal. After a long, tension-filled pause, the alien finally sighed. "Fine," he said, resigned. "Proceed." Everyone held their collective breath, or whatever passed for breathing among the various species. As Jake slowly straightened the paperclip and carefully inserted it into the slot, for a moment, nothing happened. Then, all at once, the elevator came alive with a sound like 1,000 wind chimes clanging in perfect harmony. The intricate patterns etched into its surface began to ripple and swirl, shifting like living mosaics. The faint hum that had accompanied Jake's first touch intensified, transforming into a musical hum that resonated through the air. The entire space seemed to buzz with energy. Jake stepped back, a grin of both awe and smug satisfaction spreading across his face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I think we have liftoff." With a soft whoosh, the elevator doors slid open, revealing an interior that was the very opposite of the void Jake had encountered earlier. Inside was a sleek masterpiece of alien design, full of gleaming surfaces, softly glowing lights, and holographic displays projecting complex diagrams. It looked like something straight out of a futuristic dream, the kind of cutting-edge tech you'd expect in the finest sci-fi movies. The crowd gasped in unison. Zix Sorp's eye stalk spun so wildly that Jake briefly worried they might unscrew themselves. It's working," The Glorian whispered in disbelief. After all these centuries, it's actually working. Jake clapped him on what he hoped was a shoulder. See, sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. Now, who's up for a joyride? The air in the room was electric with excitement. Aliens of every size and shape clamored forward, eager to be the first to experience the newly reawakened elevator. Jake found himself the recipient of enthusiastic pats on the back and several other strange appendages by various grateful beings. As the first group of adventurous volunteers crammed into the elevator, Jake couldn't suppress a chuckle. Who would have thought Earth's first major contribution to galactic society would be fixing an elevator with a paperclip? But maybe, just maybe, that was the kind of outside-the-box thinking the universe had been waiting for. Word of Jake's unconventional solution spread across the space station faster than a supernova, or whatever the alien equivalent of a supernova was. Sorp had tried to explain something about rapidly expanding quantum fields, but Jake had tuned out after the first few words. Within hours, every major media outlet in the Galactic Federation was covering the story. Holographic headlines flashed throughout the station. Human fixes 500-year-old technology with simple tool. Paperclip diplomacy, Earth's first galactic achievement. Could office supplies hold the key to universal knowledge? Suddenly, Jake found himself in the spotlight, surrounded by alien reporters of every imaginable species. They bombarded him with questions, ranging from the technical, "Can you describe the quantum mechanics behind your repair?" to the utterly ridiculous, "Is it true that humans keep small black holes in their pockets for emergencies?" Jake handled it all with a mix of humor and genuine amazement at the situation. He never imagined he'd become an interstellar sensation. "Look," he said to one overly persistent Zonian reporter who looked like a sentient fern with eyeballs, "I'm just a guy who's good with his hands and willing to think outside the box. Or, in this case, inside a very small box." He held up the now famous paperclip with a playful grin. The crowd of reporters surged forward, capturing every angle of the legendary tool. Jake couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. In the end, it seemed that sometimes the most primitive of solutions could unlock the greatest mysteries in the universe. Meanwhile, Sorp was caught in the whirlwind of political fallout. The Galactic Federation's Historical Preservation Committee was in disarray, torn between celebrating the restoration of the ancient elevator and grappling with the embarrassment of having their greatest mystery solved by what they viewed as a primitive species. Jake eventually found the Glorian sitting in a secluded corner of the station, his tentacles twisted into such an intricate tangle that it looked like he'd attempted to crochet himself. "Hey, tentacles," Jake called out as he plopped down beside him. "How's it hanging? Or, I guess in your case, writhing?" Sorp's eye stalks rotated toward him, radiating a mix of exasperation and gratitude. "It has been difficult," he admitted. "The committee is in chaos. They're simultaneously organizing a galaxy-wide celebration of the elevator's restoration while drafting new protocols to prevent embarrassing incidents involving so-called primitive species in the future." Jake snorted. "Let me guess. Ban on paperclips?" Sorp sighed, his tentacles sagging. "Among other things, there's already talk of creating a new division dedicated to studying Earth office supplies for possible applications in advanced technologies." Jake couldn't help but laugh. "Wait till they find out about sticky notes. That's when the real fun begins." A reluctant chuckle bubbled up from Sorp. "I must admit, when I first contacted you, Jake, I never expected this." He waved a tentacle, gesturing vaguely at the chaotic hustle of the station around them. Jake leaned back, his expression turning reflective. "You know, I've been wondering about that. Why did you reach out to a human in the first place? Surely there are plenty of other alien species with unique ways of solving problems." Sorp was quiet for a moment, his tentacles writhing in thought. "There are legends," he finally said, his voice quieter than before. "Tales passed down through generations of Galactic Federation historians. Stories of a species known for their unpredictability, one capable of finding solutions where none should logically exist." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Wait, are you saying humans are some kind of galactic myth?" "Not just humans," Sorp clarified. "Earth itself. Your planet has been a subject of fascination for millennia among the older races of the galaxy. A world of contradictions, capable of producing incredible beauty and unspeakable destruction, profound wisdom and baffling foolishness." Jake grinned. "That sounds about right." Sorp continued, his tone more serious. "Some believe Earth holds the key to unlocking the universe's greatest mysteries. Others fear that same potential." Jake let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of pressure for a species that still hasn't decided if pineapple belongs on pizza. Zix-Sorp's eye stalks twisted in confusion. I don't understand the reference, but I gather it's a point of contention among your kind? You have no idea, Jake said with a laugh. But seriously, is that why you called me? Some ancient prophecy about Earth's potential? Zix-Sorp's tentacles gave a gesture that resembled a shrug. Partly, but mostly we were desperate. Desperation can lead to unexpected answers. He paused, looking at Jake with something approaching admiration. And sometimes, those answers come from the most unlikely of places. Jake grinned, holding up the now legendary paperclip. Well, here's to unlikely solutions. Jake nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Well, I'm glad I could help, even if it was just with a paperclip. It wasn't just a paperclip, Zix-Sorp said softly. It was a reminder that sometimes the simplest answers are the most profound. That wisdom can come from the most unexpected places. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the station buzz with life around them. Aliens of all shapes and sizes hurried past, many casting curious glances at the odd pair, the tentacled bureaucrat and the human handyman who had cracked an ancient mystery with an earth trinket. After a while, Jake stood up and stretched. Well, tentacles, it's been fun, but I should probably get back to Earth. I've got a leaky faucet that's probably turned my apartment into a swimming pool by now. Zix-Sorp's eye stalks perked up. Actually, about that, the Galactic Federation has a proposition for you. Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, let me guess. They want me to travel the galaxy fixing ancient alien tech with office supplies? The paperclip repairman, at your service. To his surprise, Zix-Sorp nodded eagerly. Something like that, yes. We believe your unique perspective could help solve other long-standing galactic mysteries. Jake blinked, caught off guard. You're serious? Completely, Zix-Sorp said, his tentacles moving with excitement. Consider it a cultural exchange program. You share your human ingenuity with the Federation, and in return, you get to explore the wonders of the galaxy. Jake was momentarily tempted to laugh it off, to return to his everyday life on Earth. But then he remembered the thrill of solving the alien puzzle, the unexpected adventure he'd just been on. Slowly, a grin spread across his face. You know what, tentacles? You've got a deal. But on one condition. Zix-Sorp's eye stalks quivered. Name it. Jake's grin widened. I get a ship upgrade. If I'm going to be zipping around the galaxy solving alien problems, I can't do it in something called the Rusty Bucket. Zix-Sorp's tentacles wobbled in what Jake recognized as a laugh. I think that can be arranged. Welcome aboard, Jake. I have a feeling this is the start of a beautiful partnership, and perhaps a new era in galactic history. As Jake shook Zix's tentacle, both of them knew that this was the beginning of something far greater than either could have predicted. The galaxy would never be the same now that humanity had left its mark. And to think, it all started with a paperclip. 1 year later, Jake stood in front of the viewport of his new ship, the Ingenious Monkey, a name chosen half in jest, knowing it made Zix-Sorp's eye stalks twitch every time he heard it. Jake gazed out at the swirling nebula beyond, its mesmerizing colors shifting in shades of purple and green, glowing with an ethereal light that defied anything he'd ever seen on Earth. His life had become a whirlwind of alien mysteries, interstellar travel, and bizarre encounters, each one more incredible than the last. Jake smiled to himself. This was just the beginning. Beautiful, isn't it? Came a familiar voice behind him. Jake turned to see Zix-Sorp gliding into the room, his tentacles swaying gently. Never gets old, Jake replied with a grin, eyes still fixed on the nebula's vibrant colors. So, what's our next mission, tentacles? Another stuck elevator? Or maybe a cosmic vending machine that refuses to give up its snacks? Zix-Sorp's eye stalks rotated, which Jake had come to recognize as the Glorian equivalent of an eye roll. Your obsession with food dispensing machines is baffling, Jake. But no, this one's a bit more complicated. Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Complicated how? Because after the whole sentient black hole that just wanted a hug situation, my threshold for complicated is pretty high. Zix-Sorp's tentacles rippled with what could only be embarrassment. Yes. Well, we've received a distress call from the edge of known space. A colony ship, thousands of years old, has just reactivated, and its crew is waking up from stasis. But, Jake prompted, sensing there was more to the story. That familiar rush of excitement, the one he always got when a new puzzle presented itself, began to build. But Zix Sorp's eye stalks quivered. No one in the Galactic Federation can understand the language they're speaking. And their ship systems are, well, let's just say they make your paperclip fix look like cutting-edge technology. Jake let out a low whistle. Sounds like my kind of challenge. Any ideas what we're dealing with? Zix hesitated, his tentacles curling with uncertainty. There are theories. Some historians think this might be a lost colony ship from Earth's ancient past. Jake's jaw nearly hit the floor. You're telling me there could be ancient humans out there? That's insane. It's only a theory, Zix Sorp said cautiously. But if it's true, it could completely change our understanding of galactic history. Jake stood in stunned silence, the weight of what Zix had just said sinking in. Then, a wide grin slowly spread across his face. Well then, tentacles, what are we waiting for? Let's go make some history. As the ingenious monkey adjusted course, its powerful engines humming, Jake couldn't help but marvel at how his life had changed. From a small-time handyman on Earth to a galactic troubleshooter, he'd come a long way, and it had all started with a jammed elevator and a humble paperclip. He patted his pocket, where he always kept a spare paperclip, just in case. Never know when you might need to save the galaxy, he murmured with a chuckle. As the ship streaked toward its next adventure, Jake realized that fixing the ancient alien elevator had unlocked something far greater than he'd ever imagined: humanity's place in the vast, strange, and endlessly fascinating universe. And he couldn't wait to see what came next. The end, or perhaps just the beginning.